The round robin. Your questions, comments, wagers. Give us a reason. Sleeper fantasy play. Your best alternative line. Whatever you have. Text the round robin 757-354-5517.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, take us as star-spangled banner yet wave, for the land of the brave and the home of the brave.
This is the Deep End Broadcasting Network.
You are tuned in to the Round Robin with Stephen Murray on Deep End Broadcasting.
Still singing Bible night before my praise on the bed. Way up ahead, I see the crowd and flashing blue red lights. I run to see the crowd.
Long overdue are the docile sounds of the Pie Tasters as we come to you live from the Deep End Broadcasting Studios in the lovely Virginia Beach, Virginia, the United States of America. Football season is here. We are live just after 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, August the 4th, 2024. And the way that this show will be set up, Nephew Dave, who joins us now as well, you'll be able to replay this show all week without it losing any sort of its newsworthiness. So consider this your first week of your NFL wagering primer as we get into the full slate of the NFL season. Week 1 when it happens on September the 5th with the Thursday night game, and then the whole Sunday full slate, Sunday the 8th, where we come to you live every morning with your first look live at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's what we do, Nephew Dave. The goal of this show for you guys just tuning in now, many, many years ago, as I'm driving around, and I am a professional podcaster. We've been doing this podcasting on and off thing since 2007. So well before many of the podcasters of today's day and age. So don't get us mixed up in that front. Know that we are from the old school and genuine in those regards, indeed. But the lack of available live content, Nephew Dave, when I've been working early on a Sunday morning, trying to find some live stuff. I know I get a little itchy and antsy for NFL come Sunday morning. So if I'm up and at it at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, I want something to tune into to start getting ready for the day, start getting my thoughts together. And where that content seems to be lacking, I think we've done a great job at filling that void now in season 3 for all you new listeners out there who have not known about this show beforehand. Yes, this is our 3rd season, and we have done actually pretty good overall. And what we do is we look at every fantasy angle that there is, every wagering angle that there is. We'll take a look at it all. Odds, over-unders, whatever it may be, running props, touchdowns, 2 touchdown scores. In fact, we're going to get into that today. here in just a few minutes. We're going to start it off with a little 2-touchdown fiesta and go team by team. Me and Nephew Dave will go ahead and pick one out. But what we do is we just run the gamut of wagering. We find our best angles, and we've all been able to turn in some decent-sized wins. What have we been up to here in the recent months since we've last left you? Well, not doing too bad, actually. We've been able to hit some good bets. Had a multi-sport 5-team round robin with the Celtics, Man City. We had both of the NHL teams. We had the Florida Panthers and Edmonton Oilers, both to reach the finals. We had UConn to win it all.
Yep.
So that ticket carried a long way. Some good recent baseball success as well. So behind the scenes, we've been doing okay. And we look forward to a fantastic football season, which we have always deemed to be our bread and butter. So, Nephew Dave, welcome. How are you, man?
Yeah, it's good to be back, Steve. We're here in studio, and that means it's time for some football. Probably our favorite time of the year. We'll get things going again, and stoked to be back, Steve. Everything is right in the world once again.
Also today, after Nephew Dave, we'll have on our man Dave Del Grande from Castro Valley, California. Dave with Field Level Media. He covers the Golden State Warriors out there, but a long-time Bay Area local, so he knows the West Coast sports scene better than anyone. Dave can carry on. I love our conversations. They take a while. So we have a good hour and 45 minutes with Dave coming up where we'll break down, we'll look at some of his top storylines of the NFL. I'll go ahead and throw a few of mine out there as well. I got some individual questions about some teams and players and stuff, and then we'll translate that into the fantasy scene where, how about this, Dave? 3 of our staff, you included, Dave Del Grande included, and the Ant-Man, who you viewers, listeners will get a feel for here as we get down the road. The Ant-Man will pop in from time to time. But the 3 of you guys all winning your fantasy leagues last year.
Yes, yep. Good fantasy year last year.
So we are not giving out a bad product. Try not to be any just Joe Schmo out there giving you picks. The idea is for you to think for yourself, give you new ways to think, trusting your judgment. And yes, know that the experience is pretty good. I mean, I've been wagering NFL football since the early 1990s. 1991, I think, is when it started. Maybe 1990. Yeah, 1991 would be the fall of high school that year. And I've been on the flip side. I've been on the book side of things as well. So I've seen that from both angles. 25 years behind the book side there, Nephew Dave. So I think we bring a much better angle to this sort of thing than just those Joe Schmoes guessing. There is a realness to the hustle, as they say, and we made a career out of it of sorts in a way here. So we look to continue that on here for the last 4 months, 5 months if you want to include August here of the 2024 calendar, and then playoffs 2025. Dave will probably be here before we know it. But for me and you, Dave, today, how about this? We're going to basically just go division by division here. Let me see if I can. So it's always an issue bringing up the book on the computer because they want you to go through 1 million passwords. So I'm just going to have to do this by the phone today. And what we'll do is we're going to just go division by division, get your thoughts overall about some of the teams in those divisions. We'll give the division odds out. And then also, as we talk about each of those teams, I want each of us to identify a 2-touchdown score. Who can we put down on a piece of paper today that we can lock you in as a player potentially that will score twice in a game? Some of our better bets have been with the round robin parlays with the 2-touchdown scores. And if you can hit those, you're going to get a nice big ticket. Really, you just need to hit one bet all season, and you probably pay for the rest of your season. But we want to hit a few. You get 3, 4, 5 in a season. I mean, you're talking about big bucks that you can actually put into your pocket for NFL football. And not have a cry of sleep all season long. So let me get to the NFL odds here. Unfortunately, with the Olympics and everything, the NFL is far to the right of the menu still. You would think they would have that at the forefront. But Dave, we'll start with your NFC East.
All right.
Since that's your bread and butter, let's get all the way down to that. Right now, what I'm seeing are the Eagles as a minus 125 favorite. The Cowboys are plus 165 to win that division. Your Commanders are 10-1, and the Giants are 14-1 overall. My initial thoughts on the NFC East are this, and you've been hearing a lot about it, is Dallas is, they really need to win it all to take the next step. Otherwise, their fan base just isn't satisfied at all. You can almost sense a regression step from that team after their playoff loss to Green Bay, which was embarrassing. You're surprised that the coach maybe is even back. Eagles look to rebound after their sloppy end of their season, let's just say. I mean, it was all that was slop. They'll blame the coordinators as much as they want, but is that the truth? We'll find out, as they do have two new coordinators. But the Eagles are the decisive favorite in that division. The Commanders now have a new quarterback. Gone is Sam Howell. Daniel Jones back from injury. For the Giants, they're picked to be the doormats. What are your first thoughts on this division?
Right, Steve. And it's worth, I'm going to throw in there real quick, as we always make a note of, to shop around. Because we have a little bit different over here with me. I have the Eagles at minus 110. Cowboys.
Oh, much better price. Yeah.
Plus 155.
Mm-hmm.
Plus 800 for Washington, and then 18-1 for the Giants. That number is probably, I think, appropriate for the Giants, even though they get their quarterback. They did pick up, a pretty good receiver in Malik Neighbors there from LSU. So those two might make a connection, but still everything else I feel like they have going on. I just don't think of them as a strong team, if that makes any sense. The Commanders, we're going to go kind of backwards here from last to first. Washington, I think, can make some noise. Been some pretty good reports of relationships being made there in camp. Now, with that being said, it's all camp, and we don't know, what we're going to see until it's put out on the field. But there is reason for at least a little bit of optimism. I think, if everything goes in their favor, they can be in the fight for a wild card. I don't want to say that they're ready to win the division just yet, but I think the upswing is here, and we're going to see a better product than we did last year. Now, with the Cowboys, Steve, you got a lot of players on that team also in the last year of their contracts, which could make, for some noise there in Dallas. But as you said, are they going to make that next step? They haven't done it yet, Steve, and everybody, all the fans are always on them, and this is their year. Well, they're going to have to really show me that. They always have a great regular season, and they cannot produce in the playoffs. Is Dak still going to be there? You bring back Elliott. I don't know why you do that. Some of these moves don't make a lot of sense. And with all the background noise I feel like they have going on again, with players that are going to leave, they're not going to be able to retain everybody. Decisions are going to have to be made. So we'll see what that kind of factors into their play. And then there's the Eagles, who I think, are probably the strongest team in that division right now. They get Saquon. That's going to be a good connection there with Hurts. Maybe take a little bit of pressure off him running the ball. You can always dump it to Saquon in the back too. So I think they're going to have a pretty dangerous offense, and I kind of see them getting back on track, Steve.
You got to think it's the Eagles to lose. But, just the way that they ended that season gives me such a bad taste in my mouth that I just want to see them run this thing back. Now, it seems like they have top to bottom the most talent of
right.
any team by far. I mean, I think that goes without saying. Also, they got Saquon Barkley now as well. In fact, let me just pull up their depth chart here. AJ Brown, keeping him happy, right? I mean, that's just another thing. They're going to be an interesting team. I need to see Jalen Hurts throw the ball too, Dave, with complete consistency, I should just say, overall. He hasn't shown that quite yet. Now, he can dig that ball, and yeah, he does have some pretty throws, and they do look great at times, and he does have the phenomenal ability to run that ball short. He's the best quarterback sneaker of all time, maybe, at this point. You thought Tom Brady was because he was always doing it, and he was, but Jalen Hurts, physical with authority, seems to be able to do that, the old tush-push play. We'll see if defenses have gotten an answer for that this year. But I don't know. I just want to see it one more time. Injuries happen all the time as well. So what happens if this team gets dinged up? I mean, you're getting some nice prices. And if it's not going to be Dallas, then who? Or the Eagles, Dave, then who? Is it the Commanders?
I think it has to be. I don't think it's the Giants again. I just don't see them doing much.
So a lot of pressure on the rookie quarterback, which he has a chance to be phenomenal for sure. All right, Dave, 2 touchdown scores. Let's start from the bottom to the top, just like you did with the Giants. You got one for us to keep an eye on here?
We doing each team, or are we just picking one from the division?
We'll pick one from each team.
All right, one from each team. Let me pull up the Giants here. I kind of have a feeling I know who I'm going to go with. I'm kind of high on the rookie that they picked up, Malik Neighbors. Looking in their room here, Steve.
They don't score a lot.
They don't score a lot. They got Eric Gray, guy from Oklahoma. He's a running back. He could produce a little bit for them. If it's going to be anybody, Steve, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go with Neighbors.
One of the players we tried to hop on board with last year was Isaiah Hodgins. He kind of turned it on there towards the end of the season, and that's what he did the season before. Is he went hot come playoff time and at the end of the season, and then he just sputtered from the get-go. We jumped off his ship, and then he kind of picked it up at the end of the year last year. But I'll give you one to keep an eye out on. Just Wan'Dale Robinson seemed to have a decent little year as well for the Giants. So that would be one for them. How about on your Commanders, Dave?
Steve, I have a feeling with some of the moves that they made, bringing in Eckler there is going to take a little bit of the load off of Brian Robinson Jr. and kind of maybe keep him a little bit more fresh. I could see him getting in twice a couple times this year, Steve. That's who I'm going to go with. Running back Brian Robinson Jr.
Ryan, yeah, he was good, man. He turned it on for me last year at times for sure. Able to get some touchdowns as far as the anytime touchdowns. It was hard to get a 2-touchdown score on the Commanders. Like the Giants, they just weren't a 2-touchdown scoring team. But Robinson was the one to do it. If anyone here, let's see what we have on their depth chart with me. And you got to figure he is the favorite over Austin Eckler to get the more carries.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to give you Jaden Daniels. Just from his foot standpoint alone, his leg standpoint alone, he's going to be able to scramble. So I would keep an eye out for him for sure for 2 touchdowns for the Commanders.
And if he can keep it, stay healthy and whatnot, if you find Washington within the 15 to the goal line, there he is maybe looking to make a move. So I think that's pretty good.
Looks like Luke McCaffrey is now number 3 on your depth chart for being the 3rd wide receiver. What can you tell me about him?
Steve, well, we're going to see. Hopefully he ends up being half as good as his brother, but I think he can play. So he brings a little bit of grit, and he's got that name. So maybe he'll be looking to prove something. I feel pretty decent with him in there.
6'2", out of Rice. So you didn't hear much about him at college.
No.
Fact that he did play at Rice. Okay, but I'll give you Jaden Daniels for LSU for me. The Cowboys, they're going to be out without Tony Pollard this year, and CD Lamb.
I think it's got to be him. So
Yeah,
that's who I'm going to go with.
So I'll give you that one. He was a phenomenal 2-touchdown scorer last year. Let's see if I can. Well, I'll tell you what, Dak does like his tight ends, and Ferguson started to turn it on a little bit towards the end of the season last year as well for Dallas. So I'll go ahead and give you Jake Ferguson for the 2-touchdown score for the Cowboys, the tight end number 87 for him. Let's see. Besides that, they're going to have the same cast of characters back. Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert, interesting. Kavante Turpin. They do have some new names here. Jalen Brooks. He would be number 4 or 5 on your depth chart for receivers for Dallas. But I'll go ahead and give you Jake Ferguson and CD Lamb for you, Davis. Pretty obvious. Okay, How about for the Eagles?
Eagles, I think it's going to be a similar scenario here. Looking at the wide receiver room, that doesn't really excite me all that much there. Steve, I'm going to go with either Saquon or A.J. Brown. And I think if I'm picking one, it'll probably be more so A.J. Brown.
Saquon Barkley was a great 2-touchdown scorer for the Giants last year, actually. And he was the only one who scored for the Giants last year. That being said as well, Jalen Hurts was also pretty good at scoring touchdowns. He was a great anytime touchdown scorer. And he did have 2 touchdowns on several occasions. He even had 3 in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. So I'll go ahead and give you Hurts. You can't scratch him off that list.
No.
But Barkley, with the ability to score as well, this really could be a dangerous team scoring points here. The scary thing is, too, Dave, I think they picked up the tempo on offense. They're running more of a faster offense as well. So we'll see how all that plays out. Let's go to the NFC North. Overall, Dave, we have the Bears. Let me get the division odds for this. Bears, Lions, Packers, and the Vikings. I think the Vikings are pretty much the doormat favorite, right? Yeah, 10-1 for the Vikings. Although they may have the best defense in that division. So keep that in mind, especially with Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator. And Sam Darnold apparently is playing pretty decent in training camp. But here we are. We have the Bears, Packers, and the Lions. Of course, the Lions probably with a decent chance to get to the Super Bowl last year, but they come up just short against the 49ers. Packers as well. They just needed to play a little bit better against San Fran, and they had a chance themselves. The Bears are the up-and-comer here. But what are you looking for overall in this division, Dave?
Steve, I think it's going to be the Lions again, and I think they're going to be able to
plus 130 for them is what I see. You probably have different.
I have 135. So I think they'll be able to do something close to what they did last year. I have them winning this division somewhere in the futures tucked away, I'm pretty sure. Packers, I feel like will do, what they usually do. They're going to be fighting for the wild card there. Maybe they keep up with the Lions, but I just think the Lions are too good. Packers fighting for a wild card, probably get one. Bears, we'll see what they do. They're going to have to prove it still. And I don't know, Steve. We'll have to see what the Bears do. I might flip-flop them with the Vikings. The Vikings have that good a defense. That's what's going to have to carry them this year, I think. And if the offense can just do just enough and let that defense kind of do what it does, then maybe they finish a little bit better than people think. But again, the Bears are on a prove-it year, and we'll see what Caleb Williams is able to do over there.
I think at the end of the day, all 4 of these teams are going to be considered playoff worthy. Whether they're going to get there or not is going to be the fact that they're going to all beat up at each other. So it's going to lead me to say not. You can't. Maybe we'll get 3 teams in there from the NFC North. And I agree with you in the sense that it just feels like it's Detroit's time.
Right.
It just kind of feels like it's their time to step forward and do it. But is it? You always got to ask that question, you know? What happens if Goff gets hurt,
Right.
And then where do you go from there? Any slip up by the Lions, and I think any of these teams can slip up there to the top of the division, especially if the Vikings do have the best defense. And I do like Green Bay. A lot of fun receivers on that team. Jordan Love, now the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. What do you think about that? And this really is a tough division. Now, as far as I'll go first in this division. As far as 2 touchdown scorers go, I'm just going to go right back to the well that I was at last year with this guy, and that's Jahmyr Gibbs for 2 touchdowns. He was fantastic. It started off with Montgomery being that man, but Jahmyr Gibbs, by the end of the season, was the dominant running back for the Lions. But I'm going to go to that well. Jahmyr Gibbs, 2 touchdowns, even after that bad fumble in the playoffs in San Francisco. I think he has a great season again this year. So I'll look for him as a consistent threat to have 2 touchdowns. What do you got?
Yeah, Steve, that's a pretty good pick. That's who I was thinking about. But if we're going to air it out a little bit, I'm going to go with Amon St. Brown for 2.
Very capable. And there's Jameson Williams getting up there in the
and he's a sneaky pick to do that too.
Top of the depth chart too, and he has lots of speed. He's going to be interesting to see how his odds change, because he was paying very well in some long shot odds last year. With Green Bay, I mean, there's any number of 2 touchdown scorers you can go on this route, but the one guy who did pretty good for me, and I'm just going to have to just go back to the well on him again as well, is Jaden Reed, the wide receiver for the Packers. Jaden Reed was a great 2 touchdown scorer at a couple of times there last season, and a anytime touchdown scorer. He's definitely cashed me a ticket or 2. So Jaden Reed, I'll go back to the well on him. Who are you going to look at, Dave, on the Packers?
I am going to look to Romeo Doubs, but I want to throw a sneaky one in there with Tucker Kraft down in the red zone.
And Josh Jacobs could actually have a really, really good season if they use him like they did Aaron Jones. You're going to see Josh Jacobs. He got paid a good contract. Hungry player as well. Don't be surprised if he has a really, really good season. So he'll be a threat for 2 touchdowns as well. I got great payouts on Cole Kmet for 2 touchdowns last year, the tight end for the Bears, Dave. So I'll give you Cole Kmet again this year. What are you going to give me?
So I'm going to give you, let's see here. I'm going to go with DJ Moore, Steve. That guy, he just seems to produce. I remember what he did to my Washington footballs in the last season. That was he had the performance of a lifetime. If you had him on fantasy, you were having just a fantastic day with him alone. So with Williams there, I think he can probably get him the ball a little bit more. And I think we're going to go with DJ Moore. I do like Rome Odunze, though, the rookie on that team as well.
So if you were to pick the finishing positions overall, what would you look at right now? Where each team would finish in that division? You got Detroit 1, Green Bay 2.
I'm going to go Green Bay 2, Steve, and then I'm going to do it. I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to go Vikings 3, Bears 4.
That would pay 11-1 right now. I'm going to. It's hard. I mean, I think Detroit has it, but why do I just smell a sucker this year on that, man? You know,
right?
I'm going to go the opposite. I'm just going to pick Green Bay or Minnesota last.
All right.
Just not enough firepower where the quarterback position is at the moment.
Right.
I just can't trust Sam Darnold. I love Justin Jefferson. And he's always been a 2 touchdown scorer. So
yep.
I'll go ahead. We'll just throw that out there. We'll probably have to pick 2 other ones. TJ Hawkinson on the pup list for Minnesota. But just not enough firepower across the board. But they do have Aaron Jones. So how about that, Dave? Aaron Jones, 2 touchdown scorer.
Right.
For the Vikings. What do you got?
I'll tell you what, Steve. We'll go. Besides Justin Jefferson, which is the obvious one. Give me a little bit of Jordan Addison.
Good season last year. Seems to be a player on the rise himself. All right, let's get to the NFC South. Atlanta, Carolina, New Orleans, and Tampa Bay. And let's see here. The odds dictate that Atlanta is the favorite, minus 120. Tampa Bay, who was your champion last season, plus 310. Saints, plus 380. Carolina, 10-1. Your initial thoughts of this division, David?
Steve, so all I'm going to do here is flip-flop the 1 and 2. I think Tampa still has, what they need to finish first in this division again, which I don't see being very strong anyway. I know people are pretty, high on the Falcons to take this division, and I could see why. But I think I just like the Bucs a little bit more. I haven't heard much good anything coming from the Saints. I'll say that. And then the Panthers, they could be looking at another ugly year. So give me Tampa at plus 320 to win that division.
Interesting division in a sense that I think you kind of said most of what I'm generally thinking overall. Tampa Bay, to me, was kind of an under-the-radar team last year, and I feel like they're an under-the-radar team again this year. And go ahead and give me that. I think Baker's the best quarterback in that division overall from top to bottom. Oh, and you do now have Kirk Cousins, but he's older. And, what's his, he's coming off the injury there, right, with the Achilles. He is in his mid to upper 30s at this point. Baker's a little bit of a younger whippersnapper still in that regard. And I think he does have better weapons overall. So I'm going to lean towards the Buccaneers to win this division, as we said right now. Obviously, everything me and Dave are saying could change here in the next 2 weeks, depending on injuries and training camp. The Saints are a weird one to me. I hear a lot of people down on them, but I have heard one or two people saying, watch out. They could be a sneaky, sneaky team. Derek Carr at helm. It's just something that it's hard for me to put stock in. Bryce Young with Carolina. They can't be any worse than last year, just winning 2 games overall. But can he see over his line to throw the ball? At the end of the day, he just is a short quarterback to me. And Atlanta, they just have to prove it at some point that they can just do it, have a good long stretch of 11-5, 11-6 type of season for the Falcons. They have that hope now with Cousins. They're going to tell me Drake London's actually still really good now. We think Bijan Robinson is still really good now as well. Do they have defense? That seems to be a big question mark for sure with Atlanta. So I'm with you. I'll lean with Tampa Bay across the board. Go ahead and give me a 2-touchdown score for Tampa, Dave.
For Tampa, all right, let me pull that one up. I was on Atlanta. For Tampa, we're going to go with Steve. I think I like Mike Evans, but I'll tell you the first one that popped into my mind was Rachaad White.
Right. And he was a good receiving running back.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm thinking.
For receiving props and prop yards. So Rachaad White, you could always pick him up to the alternate of about 40 receiving yards and get a nice little plus payout. He seemed to carry that for the most part. Let's see here. Jalen McMillan is a new receiver here. They do have Trey Palmer. Jalen McMillan. Let's see, out of Washington. So that's an interesting guy right there. He's coming from a program that was in the national championship game. He played aside Rome Odunze. I do like your Mike Evans, and I do like your Rachaad White here. I'll go ahead and throw the tight end at you, Cade Otton.
There you go. Yep.
Otten showed the capability to be a decent receiver for Tampa Bay last year as well. For New Orleans, Dave, what do you got?
All right, New Orleans. We'll see what they got.
That seems to be a harder one to me, but I'll start with Olave is the obvious one, right?
Well, yeah, he would be the obvious pick there, Steve. But let me throw this at you and see what you think. I have two. Rashid Shaheed, I think, could possibly, be a 2-touchdown guy for him. But what about Taysom Hill as the little utility tool there? Could he get in twice? I mean, I could see a scenario. Maybe he does it once or maybe twice this year. But I think those are the only two, Steve, that really jump out at me in that regard.
A good player for me last year was A.T. Perry. This is one of the Ant-Man's finds, but I jumped on A.T. Perry, and he did have success with 1 touchdown. I think he got 2 touchdowns once, but he did win me a nice Thursday night ticket. I do recall when the Saints played. I think they played at the Rams on a Thursday night is what it was. So keep an eye out for A.T. Perry for me. Go ahead with your 2-touchdown score for the Falcons.
Steve, it's got to be Bijan for me.
Right, you figure that's the layup. Will Kyle Pitts emerge finally? We say that every year. I don't know. Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Rondell Moore. I mean, it really just sounds like, with the exception of London, who sounds like a number 2 receiver, the other guys feel like 3 or 4 receivers to me. I'll go ahead and give you Tyler Algier because we can't forget about him, can we?
Right.
And he did have 2 touchdowns in week 1 last year, if you do recall that at all. I do remember that because we all had Bijan. And Algier got 2 touchdowns. Carolina Panthers, David.
All right, the Panthers. I almost forgot about them. All right, if we're going to go to the Panthers here, we're going to pull up the squad, and we're going to go with maybe Miles Sanders, Steve.
Miles Sanders, the ex-Eagle who's been with Carolina now for a couple of seasons. Didn't have the best season last year, but maybe he can get a little bit better this year. Chuba Hubbard seems to I got him at the top of the depth chart that I'm looking at right now.
Yep.
And he did score 2 touchdowns a few times. Xavier Leggett's going to be a new player. He's a wide receiver out of South Carolina. So he's not far from home.
There is Deontay Johnson, too.
They do have Deontay Johnson, so that is an upgrade. They do have Adam Thielen for a 2-touchdown scorer. And I was all over Jonathan Mingo a little bit last year, but he didn't really ever do too much for me at the end of the day. If you take Sanders, I'll go ahead and give you Chuba Hubbard.
All right.
The other running back.
Fair enough.
Bryce Young, hand the ball off when you're close. Don't F it up.
How much of that are we going to see this year?
In our last division for today, we'll do the NFC West. Next week, we'll look at the AFC. Nephew Dave and I, and some other stuff as well. But at the NFC West, Arizona, the Rams, the 49ers, and the Seahawks. Let's see here. 49ers minus 190, Rams plus 330, Seahawks plus 700, Cardinals plus 1,300. Where are you going to lean here, Dave?
Well, Steve, I think it has to be San Francisco. Have any of these teams here, gotten good enough to start thinking about them overtaking the 49ers here in this division? I'm not so sure that they have, and I think the 49ers are clear cut.
I feel like they are, but with hesitation, I say that.
Well, with hesitation, I think maybe, we'll see what the Seahawks do. Maybe they have a shot there in that division. But Steve, at this point in time, with a new, fresh season, it's hard for me to kind of look at anybody else other than the 49ers. We'll have to dive into that a little bit more to see kind of what these teams have. Do they have it, Steve? I'm just not so sure.
You got to figure it's the 49ers to lose. But I do feel like everyone's a little bit better. I think the shock and awe of the 49ers has worn off a little bit with their loss to Kansas City in the Super Bowl. I just feel like some of these teams aren't going to be intimidated by them as much.
Right.
That being said, they are a talented team. And for 2 touchdowns overall, Christian McCaffrey, I mean, how do you not pass that up at the end of the day, right? Now, McCaffrey is one of those guys where 2 touchdowns is like minus 110, plus 125, you know, so you're not getting a big payout on that at the end of the day. But Debo did pretty good for 2 touchdowns for me. He cashed a ticket or 2 last year, so I'll give you a Debo Samuel. What do you got?
I'm going to go with Ayuk, Steve, as my first one there.
Not traded and back and happy. All right, we got you.
Well, not so sure how happy he is, but he is back, so he's going to do his thing, you know. So give me some Ayuk.
All right, and if there is a team that I think does take it over the 49ers, I think it is the Rams. If the 49ers don't get first, I do feel like it's the Rams. Go ahead and give me Kyron Williams for a 2-touchdown scorer. I used him a decent amount.
Give me some Cooper Kupp, kind of the obvious layup there. He's always in the mix for that. And if we're going with an alternate, also at receiver would be Puka Nacua. He really did well for me last year, so you know, we'll give him some praise in this one as well.
All right, 2 touchdown scores for the Seattle Seahawks. This is a team that I'm not so sure that Geno Smith isn't on a short leave with Sam Howell, number 2 now, coming over from Washington.
Right.
I think Howell may get his chance here. And I like to try to see him throw the ball to a DK Metcalf, a Tyler Lockett, a Jackson Smith, and Jigba, which is a good receiving core. And I do love me some Kenneth Walker III as a 2-touchdown scorer as well. Who do you like?
Steve, so I'm actually gonna side with you on that one. That's the guy that I was looking at. I'm gonna go with Kenneth Walker as well.
All right, and the Cardinals are the last team. Emerging out of nowhere was Trey McBride at tight end. Fantastic year for him. The Cardinals did ruffle some feathers as they were picked to be the worst team in football potentially last year, but they did win some games, and we'll see if they can kind of take another step this season. James Conner, great year for him running the ball as well. Who do you like? 2 touchdowns.
All right, Steve, I like the Kyler Murray to Marvin Harrison Jr. connection. I think, you know, again, if Kyler can stay healthy, yes, he is a short quarterback, but if he can find Harrison, I think they have a big playmaker there, and I think he is probably set up to get 2.
And I'll give you James Conner. I think he can have another good season. I feel like a lot of people have written him off for dead, but he's been pretty good here for Arizona, and I'll give these guys a chance to compete in that NFC West this year. All right, Dave, so that's a good feel for the NFC for this week anyway. We kind of shook the rust off a little bit on the show. We'll look at some AFC stuff next week, and we have plenty of preseason time to kill looking at odds and how odds change. We'll see how the injuries develop through training camp. That's going to be kind of the main storyline that I'll be looking at, too, as we go in through August. What about you? What are you going to look for here in the next month?
Well, I'm just going to look for, I'm going to see how much playing time that the Washington quarterback gets, see what he can kind of produce. I'm going to look for, not that the starters are going to get a lot of time, but going to look for connections and maybe some depth players that these teams have that might just give them that little extra edge, having that better depth.
All right. So I'll wrap it up with you for now. Let's go ahead and we'll queue up our man, Dave Del Grande. Good conversation with him. And we will discuss more NFL stuff. We'll go ahead and hit up some fantasy here. And let me go ahead and plug him in. So Dave Del Grande from Castro Valley, California. our man Dave Del Grande from Castro Valley, California. He's with us all season long. He's been with us for the last 2 seasons, from the very beginning all the way through the Super Bowl. Picks have been amazing. Insight has been amazing. He won his fantasy league last year on top of that. So the contributions to this program by our guest now have been phenomenal. Dave, it is 103 degrees here in Virginia, and it is humid. Tell me you have much better conditions out there in California right now.
Well, if you happen to tune in to the Dodgers and A's game.
Oh, yeah, Brent Rooker.
I
love Brent Rooker, Dave. I'll let you expand on that maybe, too, in a second, but go ahead.
But, you actually saw some people wearing jackets. I mean, it was downright chilly here last night. I mean, if you looked at they showed a couple of shots at the sky, and that was a little bit deceiving, but, man, it looked like it was going to rain. And it was, a little on the cold side. In fact, they were talking about the Dodgers, how much, wouldn't they much rather play in weather that's, slightly on the cold side as compared to, what everybody's been playing with all season. Giants just had a home series where the same thing. It was surprisingly chilly. We've had our hot days here, no doubt about it, but we're in a bit of a cold spell, the last week. And, I've got to say, it's a little enjoyable.
I tell you what, in my older age, I'm starting to like winter a lot more than the Virginia summers. That's for sure. Dave, here we are, again, 103 degrees, and we're talking football. But we are here on the start of a new season. There's all kinds of storylines out there. I mean, as we go through our conversation today, we will barely touch the tip of the iceberg. We'll have plenty more here in the preseason in the weeks to come, and then week 1 will be here before we know it. But there will be a few storylines in particular that I'll just be kind of looking for myself ahead of time. I'll get to those in a second. But maybe what are the 2 or 3 things that kind of ring your bell here to start the season? I mean, you can go a number of different directions, but what will you be looking for here as we get up to kickoff here in early September?
Well, come on. The number one story in all of sports. And who would have thought we'd be saying this, is NFL kickoffs.
Oh, I was wondering if that was really going to come up. Dave, it is a lack of – so I'll say this before you get into your little spiel. One of the things as a nostalgic NFL fan that I like is when the TV is coming back from commercial break and you see everyone lined up for a kickoff and you kind of hear the roar of the crowd kind of amping up to a big crescendo, and then the ball gets kicked off the tee and then it hangs up in the air for a while, finally comes down, and then, well, whether it's a touchback or not, it's another story. But that crescendo and that crowd noise, and I know I get it, it's Canton, Ohio on a Thursday night with thunderstorms coming. But, man, that sounded like a morgue when they did that kickoff the other night. That just didn't feel right to me. But go ahead.
Well, that was the most disappointing part of that game the other night, was they had such a big buildup to, everybody, you've got to pay attention to this opening kickoff. There's this new exciting thing that's happening in the NFL. And then they kicked it off, and it was like, that was exciting? Are you kidding me? And I have to chalk that up to a typical preseason hype where, we've got all these great players, but we're not going to play them in the preseason. I got the impression that, we have some really creative stuff we're going to do on kickoffs, but we ain't going to show you or anybody else until it really matters. Because you couldn't have been more basic and boring. It's like, for 6 months, all the talk has been about, the special teams coordinator. They got a chance to be real creative with this new kickoff thing. There wasn't 1 ounce of creativity. Right. It reminded me of the Turkey Bowl. Me and my friends going out to College Marin and on Thanksgiving Day and playing a touch football game where if you played in these games, most people have, you line up to kick off and you punt the ball to the other team and you run down the field and nobody blocks and you run. It's like the most boring play of the entire game. And that was exactly what this reminded me of. There wasn't any scripted. Okay, well let's run a reverse, or let's overload one side, or let's do something. Let's try a lateral, or let's do anything creative. If just kick off, you block this guy, you block this guy, you block this guy, you try to block this guy and miss him, and then we'll run it out to the 25. You'll get tackled, and the announcers will say, "Oh boy, that was boring." Or, "Well, there'll be another kickoff. Stay tuned." And the whole game, they didn't do anything. I mean, I think it's going to be an interesting play. I think that I don't want to read too much into what I saw on TV, which was, absolutely zero thought was put into these plays, and you wonder why. I mean, if this is really the way it's going to be in the regular season, then these special teams coordinators should all be fired, because you have a rare opportunity here to try something different. I mean, and that even means I was curious to see which types of players that they were going to line up in the rugby scrum, between the 35 and the 30-yard line or whatever it is. Because to me, it's almost like if you're on the the receiving end, why wouldn't you put offensive linemen out there? And because you're trying to. I mean, every play in essence is like a sweep or a reverse or whatever. I mean, you want to set up. You've got to create a wall for these guys. You don't have to run anywhere, so there's no real athleticism necessary. You just want guys who can block and create a hole for these fast guys who are going to be running up the field, and so it's like, okay, you know what? Let's treat this like a power sweep. Let's pull our guards. Let's get everybody over there on the right side. Let's overload, with 7 tight ends and offensive linemen against these little guys that they're going up. They're running down the field against us. Create a gap somewhere, like as if Achan is running the ball around the end, and let's go. And again, there was none of that. There was, okay, I'm going to play, my typical special teamers, a lot of backup linebackers, a lot of backup safeties that you're going to come out on the other end, and you're going to have the same type of guys, and one-on-one blocking, and you just, these guys don't do blocking. Your backup linebackers don't block anybody. They don't know how to block anybody. I just thought, I think the potential is there for it to be really creative and really exciting. And I think that, the better, more creative special teams coaches are going to have a chance to really make it fun. And so that's what I'm looking forward to. I was looking forward to seeing it the other night. We didn't get to see it. Now I wonder if we're going to get to see it at all in the preseason. There are certain teams like Baltimore. Baltimore has always been a very creative, the team that spends, John Harbaugh spends a lot of times on special teams. And I really look forward to what a team like that can come up with, because I think the potential is there for, the bar is very low on kickoff returns, but I think that there's potential there for, a couple of exciting plays a game. And like I said, you've had 6 months to script things and try to how I mean, how are we going to do this? What types of players do we want out there? Can we possibly do this? What are the rules? And I just gotta believe that these guys who are brilliant in some ways in special teams coaching, I gotta believe that they're going to come up with a means of making that play, worth watching.
What else is kind of tipping your cap here?
Well, I think that I would say in terms of real football, I'm fascinated by what's happening at the wide receiver position. We've talked about the couple of years that I've talked to you,
right?
Stock
is up on the receivers, big time.
Exactly. Yep. Stock is up on the receivers, and how many of them now are coming out of college football and immediately being good enough to play and make a statement in the NFL. And I think, personally, this is going to lead to a new dynamic in wide receivers, and I think we're seeing it with the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh has been in the NFL. He's gone back to college. Now he's gone back to the NFL. It's like, well, what's going to be different about Jim Harbaugh this second time around? And I think we're already seeing it, even though they haven't even played yet. And that is the very first thing he did when he came back, was he got rid of his wide receivers. It's like, you know what? I don't care how good you are, Keenan Allen and Williams, or that's his name, right? The other receiver, receiver, Mike Williams, right? I don't care how good you are. We're not paying you $15 million, $20 million, $30 million these guys are making now. Because you know what? Here's what I learned in college football. If you watch Alabama, if you watch Ohio State, it's every year they open a new can of wide receivers. Oh, my God, how's Alabama going to replace, their wide receiver just won the Heisman Trophy. They've got this other guy who runs a 4.140. They both graduated. They're doomed. No, Alabama's got 5 other guys just like them. And we see this every year. And we see this at Ohio State every year. And so it's like, you know what? We're going to draft, we're going to treat this like college. We're going to go out there and we're going to recruit, or, in the NFL is draft, young wide receivers, and we're going to play them for 4 years, and they're going to be really good. And after 4 years, when it's time for them to make money, you know what? Hit the pike. We don't need you anymore. You've graduated, and we're opening a new can, with 2 more guys. And this is going to be a way of being able to pay your quarterback big money. Because you see now that there's a big advantage teams have that have quarterbacks on a rookie scale. When you're paying Brock Purdy $8 million and the Chiefs are paying Mahomes $50 million, that's $42 extra million that the 49ers have that the Chiefs don't have. Now, they should be able to take advantage of that, presuming that, that they can get decent play out of this young quarterback. Well, I just think there's going to come a day when every quarterback is going to make $40 billion or $50 million, and you just can't have you can't, once you pay that kind of money, it's very hard to have 2 or 3 more star players because the cap is very low in the NFL. And so I think that what you need to do is, if you can find a position or 2 where you can continue to play these guys on rookie salaries, then that's going to obviously allow you to spend more money at a different position. And I think that if you play young wide receivers and you pay them $3 million, $4 million, $5 million, $6 million, and you can get really good production out of them, which you can, because that's the way they're that good these days. Now, you have extra money to pay your quarterback. So it's kind of what we're seeing, but in reverse. That when you go out and you spend $30 million on a wide receiver, or $40 or $50 million on 2 wide receivers, and now you go to pay your quarterback, and it's like, well, we can't do both, so what are we going to do now? And so I just think the way we're going to see now in the future of the NFL is the teams I don't know if the 49ers are doing this. I don't know if the Cowboys are doing this, with Lamb, the 49ers with Ayuk. But I would do this if I were the 49ers. I'd tell Ayuk, hey, you know what? We can't afford to pay you $25 million because we're going to pay Purdy $50 million next year. We got this other guy, Pearsall, that we just drafted. He's probably just as good as you. He's making $4 million. Why would we pay you $25? And I just think we're going to see more and more of that in the NFL. The quality of the position isn't going to get worse. In fact, it might even get better because, as I mentioned before, the quality of receivers coming out of college football, which is a reflection of the quality of wide receivers coming out of high school, is incredible. I mean, these guys are phenomenal athletes and ball catchers and, short yardage, short pattern receivers, tall guys who run deep. I mean, you've got every assortment of guys in multiples and multiples of these guys coming out every year, and you get them cheap. And so why wouldn't you, like I said, we've seen this work in college football year after year after year, the same teams, somehow, some way. Somehow Alabama, I couldn't tell you who's playing wide receiver for Alabama this year, but I'll tell you what, I'll bet you they have 2 of the 10 best wide receivers in college football, if not 3, and the same for Ohio State. And then when they graduate, guess what? Next year they're going to still have 3 of the top 10 at both of those schools, and it's just a assembly line. Like I said, you open a new can of wide receivers every year at these schools, and I just think that the NFL is going to head in that direction. It's gotten ridiculous how much money these wide receivers are making, and and the 49ers now are being blamed. Well, they should have seen this coming. They should have signed Ayuk to an extension back when they were only making $20 million, because now they're making $30. And what's next? So my prediction is, and I don't know whether Harbaugh is going to get credit for this or not, but certainly he's already doing it. His first day back, he's already basically told his expensive wide receivers, you know what, we ain't paying wide receivers. So go take a hike. We'll draft Ladd McConkey, from Georgia. He'll come in and he'll do just as well as Keenan Allen. You watch, and we're paying him peanuts. So I think that this is where I see part of the future of NFL football.
Yeah, I mean, you have to draw the line somewhere. I mean, think about it. Jordan Love now is the highest paid quarterback. So what does that tell every other quarterback who thinks that they're better than Jordan Love, right? At the end of the day.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. And you know what? And I've got no problem with that. I mean, we see this time and again. We saw this in the Super Bowl last year. We've seen it for a couple of years. You don't have an elite quarterback. You're a touchdown behind the team you're playing. And I don't care. I mean, the 49ers probably had better personnel than the Chiefs overall in the Super Bowl last year, but the Chiefs had Mahomes, and that was the difference in the end. Heck, it affected strategy. The one thing that came out of the Super Bowl, why didn't they take, why they take the ball first instead of last. You know, you don't want to give Mahomes the ball at the end of the game. I mean, having that guy impacts even a simple toss of the coin, in the game. And so, you need one of these quarterbacks. And so go ahead, do what you have to do. Spend your $40 million, $50 million, whatever it is. Get yourself a quarterback long term, because that, in the end, is going to go a long way toward determining whether you make the playoffs, whether you can advance in the playoffs, whether you're a serious title contender. So, and then once you do that, once you pay the 40 or 50 million for your quarterback, like you said, that money's got to come out of somebody's pocket. And who is that going to be? I just think, like I said, I think that the wide receivers are going to – we've seen this at running back, how running backs have been de-emphasized. They don't make as much money anymore. And that's fine. But that has to do with kind of a change in the way the game is played. I think when we see that wide receivers start making less money is going to be because there's just a glut of them. And oh my goodness, how many teams now? I mean, you look at teams like the Texans, or for crying out loud, the Bears. If you watched this game the other night, wow, the Bears got this guy caught 6-7 passes for 2 touchdowns at 120 yards. Man, I got to get him on my fantasy team. No, he's never going to see the light of day on that team. The Bears, they got Keenan Allen, they got DJ Moore, they got, whatever the carrier pronounced the guy's name from Washington. This guy who is big preseason star, he could be lucky to make the team. And that's just the way it is in wide receiver.
Yeah, like when we get to fantasy, I have a lot to say about teams like the Bears and the Texans with you. But keep going. Go ahead.
No, you're saying that. I said this about the 49ers. It's like, how could you possibly say the 49ers should let Ayuk go? I mean, he is may not be the best wide receiver in the league, but he probably ranks in the a top 10 guy. But it's like, I'm telling you right now that this guy Pearsall, who not even considered one of the real elite guys coming out of college last year, he will step in there and be every bit as good. And then within a couple of years, somebody else, if they get rid of Debo, somebody else will step in there and be every bit as good as he was. That's just the way it is these days with wide receivers.
Yeah, you're right. And the pricing there with their contracts, just like you said, is going to create some future chaos here in the NFL. And one of the storylines that I'm going to look at, and this is a longer developing storyline to me, but here's what I really took notice here at the end of the season last year, and I'm going to watch and see how this plays out as we get into the playoffs this year. And that is with the extra games. And now we're looking at even an 18th game. It looks like that's inevitable at this point. But when it got down to the nitty-gritty and we talked about teams who are true contenders, and we talked about these teams all season long as they were going to be good true contenders at the end of the day, teams like Buffalo, teams like Miami, okay, who actually have a chance to maybe win a Super Bowl. By the time they got to the end of the season, they didn't have anyone left on their roster that was healthy, especially the Bills on defense. Tyreek Hill got dinged up there at the end, so he was not his full speed, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if we need more roster spots available. I mean, maybe the quality just won't be there at the end of the day. But the more and more football, to me, just doesn't seem like it's going to work, just from the injury standpoint alone. And when a team like Miami this season beats down a team like Denver by whatever it was last year, 50 points or 55 points or whatever the margin of victory was in that game, I'm not going to get super excited about this team's potential. And we've always been good about kind of playing it safe. Let's not get too excited. Injuries can happen. Let's just see how the season goes. It took all the way to the NFC Championship game 2 years ago before Purdy got hurt at the beginning of that game. And there you go. That game's over with once that happens. So I'm going to watch how these injuries play out again towards the end of the season, how that's going to affect contenders, whether it's too much or not, and then I'm going to watch them at an 18th football game. What do you have to say about that?
No, I agree with that. And we're already seeing that. Even as much as these teams are trying to protect players in training camp and in the preseason games, I mean, it just seems that every day there's it's a small headline at this point, but the headline nonetheless. Hopkins is injured, out 6 weeks. The Herbert, he's injured. He's out. He's questionable for opening day. It just seems that, and even I'm out here in Northern California, so I get more news on the 49ers than any other team. But it just, every day the first question the coaches ask is, did so-and-so practice today? No, he's still out. Did so-and-so practice today? No, he's still out. Did so-and-so practice today? No, he's still out. I mean, there's, 4 or 5 injuries they have already. And I'm not talking about, he's a veteran, we're giving him the day off, or, it's a minor sprained ankle or something. I mean, this is something, he's going in for imaging. We hope to have him back in a couple of weeks. I mean, these are you barely kicked the ball off in the preseason, and already you've got 5 guys hurt, and you haven't even hit anybody yet. You've worn pads for 2 days. You haven't had any preseason games. You haven't had any of these controlled scrimmages. Imagine when that starts happening. I agree with you 100% that, these players, I'm certainly not the first one. I'm not breaking any news here, but, they're getting bigger and faster and stronger, and the collisions, as much as they try to minimize them on kickoffs and punts and where they can, they're going to happen. Wide receiver, 6'3", 220-pound wide receivers are still going to go over the middle, and 6'2", 215-pound safeties are still going to make a beeline. You can't hit them in the head anymore. Can't hit them in the knees anymore. But I tell you what, you take a shot in the stomach, there go your ribs, there goes your broken arm. I mean, whatever it is, it's just inevitable in these games. And you're right. I guess you'd have to say luck is going to play a part of it at the end because we've got 8 guys hurt, they've got 4 guys hurt. Advantage them. And it has nothing to do with who's the better team, who has the better season. They're in better shape than we are, and so unfortunately, we can't postpone the Super Bowl an additional week to get healthy. It certainly is. It makes it makes predicting how many wins a team's going to have. Are they going to make the playoffs? Are they really a Super Bowl contender? Well, what I might say today, it could be completely different 6 weeks from now when they've had some injuries. It's like, wow, if I had known this 6 weeks ago, I never would have told you they picked the playoffs because they got no chance now.
Right.
I mean, you see it with, like Burrow. When Burrow got hurt.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, there's Cincinnati, a Super Bowl contender. And there were times last year where it was like, oh my God, it looked like the worst team in the league. And, that's, but now you come back this year and you look at them and you say, well, who's going to be the most improved team in the NFL this year? Well, I'll tell you what, Cincinnati, I don't know how they did it. They went 9-8 last year. They're going to win more than 9 games this year, trust me. And it doesn't really have a whole lot to do with, the guy they drafted. They brought in free agents. No, they got a little healthier. And that's, maybe the most important thing of all in terms of trying to figure out who's going to be better this year, who's going to be worse this year is, okay, all those injuries they had last year, how are these guys doing? Because Cincinnati used to be a really good team, and last year they were very average at best. I expect them to be a real good team again, but if these guys are really healthy, so that's a real wild card in trying to project who are going to be the most improved teams this year. Ooh, this guy, the Bears drafted the number one quarterback. Are they going to be the most improved team? Well, sure, they'll be improved some, but let's look at some of these teams that were disappointing last year only because they had guys hurt, and I think that tends to get overlooked when we project forward.
Okay, and that's actually going to be a good little segue, because I'll give you another storyline that I'll kind of put it on the field too. Now, I did an off the field one like you did. You did an on the field one with the wide receivers. So I'll give you one on the field as well. And what I'm going to look at are a couple of the real better teams of last season, seeing how they can rebound after what they ended up doing last year. Because in their own specific cases, and for different reasons, all alone, I want to see these teams actually run it back. And I'm going to start, and everyone's going to think I'm crazy when I say this, but if I were to rank Kansas City, the Chiefs, as far as great Super Bowl teams, what have we had? 58 Super Bowls, whatever we're on right now, 59, 60. I even have lost track at this point. I'm going to put that Chiefs team somewhere in the 40s, okay, maybe at the highest. I think a little bit of smoke and mirrors last season, to be honest. A little bit of luck, as you said. They stayed probably the healthiest of any of the teams at the end of the day. They had Miami at home in the playoffs. The Ravens laid a complete egg in their playoff. And then, San Francisco easily could have won that Super Bowl, let's be honest. So I want to see the Chiefs do it again. And yeah, they do have Mahomes and Reed, and when they do, you're always going to have a chance. But I'm also going to throw on that list the team I just talked about, the Ravens too. I want to see how they rebound, and what looks like that's going to be a tough division. And the AFC North overall, you just mentioned again the Bengals. The Browns, I still think they have great depth at every position across the board. With quarterback still the question a little bit on that. And everyone thinks the Steelers, even as they were decent last year, should be a little bit better. And I think they actually will be if they play Fields, because I like Fields better than Russell. So I think that's going to be a tough division for Baltimore, and possible regression there, playing a first-place schedule. And the other team is Dallas, to me. And I know Jerry doesn't like to fire the coaches during the season, but to me, if Dallas gets off to a poor start, it's going to have to go on McCarthy sooner than later. I think at the end of the day, the fan base just isn't going to put up with it. Dak's got all the pressure on the world with him with the contract that he's trying to lock in, but it doesn't seem like Dallas inevitably wants to pay him that money either. It's not like their running game got better. It's probably gotten worse, but you said it too. You can go ahead and plug in guys and make it work. But Pollard's gone. He's off to Tennessee. I'm just going to have to see it again from a few of these teams, like Dallas, the Ravens, and I'm even going to throw Kansas City in there. Go ahead and tell me your thoughts on that.
No, I agree with you, but what I would say is if you're going to knock down the three teams you mentioned, Kansas City, Baltimore, and Dallas, you have to identify who's going to be the ones that knock them down. And it's kind of like a heavyweight boxing division. For as long as you could say, oh, my God, this is the worst heavyweight champion ever. He's not going to be the champion for very long. He's terrible. He's no Ali, no Foreman. But it's like, okay, we recognize that. But look at the division. There's nobody out there, say what you want about Mike Tyson. Oh man, he never would have. He wasn't nearly as good as Joe Frazier and some of these greats of all time. It's like, well, you might say that, but nobody could beat him. I mean, and he just kept knocking people out with the same punches. And I see Kansas City as kind of being that team. You're right. They were not, and certainly for most of the season, they quite a lot. They went 11-6 in arguably the worst division in football. There's no way you would say, well, that team's going to go on and win the Super Bowl, and yet they did. And so why did they? Well, Baltimore wasn't ready to beat them yet. And after Baltimore, who else is there in the AFC that you could project today?
I think it's Houston.
Well, that's the thing. And if that's the case, then you got to believe Kansas City's got a really good shot, because Houston, for what a great story they could be, and a fun team, kind of maybe this year's version of Miami. They're putting up a lot of points. They'll go into the playoffs without, with a young quarterback, and without a whole lot of experience. And, them against Kansas City on the big stage, Mahomes against, a second-year quarterback, third-year, whatever the crowd is, it's like, oh, man, no, I've seen this before. Mahomes dominates these matchups. Kansas City always beats these teams. So I don't see in the AFC, that's a very good point on Houston, that they might be that next team, because it ain't going to be Buffalo anymore, I don't think. I don't think Miami is a serious contender. You mentioned Cleveland. I mean, Cleveland and Cincinnati are going to be, playoff teams. I'm not sure they're, really, really serious contenders. And so that leaves Houston.
What about Aaron Rodgers if he can have a great season?
Well, that was going to be the next team I mentioned.
Yeah.
And I think this is why there's optimism in New York this year, because you look around. I mean, Jets won 7. I don't know how the Jets won 7 games last year, by the way.
Right? Yeah, that's crazy.
But you look at, well, Miami and Buffalo, are in the same division. But is Buffalo really going in the right direction? And is Miami, kind of a smoke and mirrors kind of team that, we got exposed?
I think they have a chance to. I think they have a chance to be better. I think health got the best of them a little bit there.
Agreed.
Yeah.
But I don't. But I just think the thinking there is, if the Jets were in the AFC North, where you look around and you say, okay, look, we're going to be much better this year, and we're going to. Oh wait, we're not better than Cincinnati. We're not better than Cleveland. We certainly aren't better than Baltimore. Where are we going? We're battling Pittsburgh for last place. I mean, that's the reason for our optimism. But in their division, it's not like that. It's like, okay, first off, we got New England in here. They're awful. Okay, so that's good. We got Miami, who we think we can beat Miami. And then we got Buffalo, and Buffalo, who knows what kind of season Buffalo is going to have this year. I think they're going to be disappointing. But anyway, my point is, the Jets in their division have, realistic optimism that they could win that division if all things fall, the right way. You don't have that same optimism if you're in the AFC North. I mean, in no way you could get everything to fall your way and still finish in third in that division. So, but you're right. I think that would it shock me if Buffalo, at the end of the day, the Jets finished 11-6 and tied for first and with Miami in their division this year? No, that wouldn't shock me at all. I mean, they've got an easier schedule. They've got Rodgers back. They've gotten a year to they're your young receiver, Wilson, their young running back. These guys have been, gotten a little bit more experience. Obviously, they've got a really good defense. I think they're better prepared this year than they were last year to have a real good season. So, they're certainly a team not to, disrespect this year going into the season. Of course, until Rodgers gets hurt in the second game, and then good luck.
In the NFC, I mean, can't you make a case for a lot of teams trying to potentially be better? Don't you? At least in my mind, I feel like Seattle. I feel like that whole division's better in the NFC West, maybe top to bottom.
Yeah, well, to me, the NFC North,
yes,
is the division where it's going to be a lot better. I mean, this is the one negative I would say, to people, saying, well, Detroit's got a chance to be in the Super Bowl next year, which they do. Problem is they got a lot tougher road to get there than they did last year.
First place schedule, yeah.
That's the one thing. But Green Bay is a very, very good team.
Yep.
Minnesota, loses their quarterback, right? And so much of it's going to come down to quarterback play in Minnesota. But Minnesota, played half their season without the best player in the league last year. I think Minnesota is a very solid team. And then, of course, there's Chicago, who should be vastly improved. I mean, there's no more soft teams in there. No more, when the Jets look at their division, we'll sweep New England. The Lions don't go in saying, we'll sweep the Vikings or we'll sweep the Bears. No, those games don't exist anymore in that division. And the NFC West, maybe I underestimate the Rams. Rams won 10 games last year. I certainly don't see them winning more than 10 games this year. If they fell back to 9-8, I wouldn't be shocked. In part because of what you said.
Right.
Arizona's gotten better.
Right.
Arizona's not going to be the pushover that they've been in the past. They could beat, they could beat the 49ers, but they could certainly beat the Rams and Seahawks. They probably did beat the Seahawks once last year. And I'm going to have to see it to believe it with the Seahawks. Just because he was my neighbor growing up, maybe I'm biased.
Right.
But I really credit Pete Carroll for what he did with the Seahawks and turning their defense into the monster that it became. As their defense has lost a lot of those pieces, they've lost their status as an elite team. They still went 9-8 somehow last year, but they're a team that they go into 2/3 of their games with the weaker quarterback in the matchup, and if that's really the most important factor in who wins NFL games these days, I'm not saying that Geno's a terrible quarterback, but he's not as good. I mean, again, you look at the division. Against Purdy, he's going to be the underdog. Against Murray, he's going to be the underdog. And against the Rams quarterback, he's going to be the underdog. I mean, he's not as good as those guys. And so you start off behind the 8 ball in those matchups.
Can I say this real quick? Because this kind of reminds me of a conversation we had exactly 1 year ago when you laughed me out of the studio, basically. And when I told you, watch out for Sam Howell and the Commanders last season, which he did really, really well until he got bludgeoned to death by the time Thanksgiving rolled around. Don't you think Geno has some sort of a short leash? I do, before Sam Howell gets involved, because I really would like to see Sam Howell actually throwing the ball to the receivers that Seattle has.
Yes, I agree with that, but at the same time, you convinced me last year that Sam Howell had the potential to have a really good season. And like you said, for about 15 minutes, he looked like an all-pro quarterback. Now, they didn't have a good team. They didn't have great wide receivers. They had no running game. I mean, it wasn't going to last all year long. But you're closer to it than I'm on the other side of the country. You're closer to it than I am. I was just disappointed with the way it turned out for him. And obviously he's not there anymore. He's I don't know. Again, if you're tooting his horn, then I'm listening, but I'm not convinced. I'm still got a bad taste over what happened last year. Right.
And then he was getting to the point where it was turning into an interception machine, just getting sacked left and right. I think the Thanksgiving game, he really was the nail in his coffin as far as consideration for coming back for Washington. Let's see here. What direction do I want to go with you now? I'll give you one other NFC team that I think will be better, and it was my sweetheart last season for the most part. Again, I got maybe not laughed out of the studio by you, but when I told people, watch out for this team, they kind of gave me the Ushka look. Like, what are you talking about?
All right, let me guess who you're going to say. You're going to say the Falcons.
No, Tampa Bay.
Okay. Oh, you should have said the Falcons.
No, the Falcons. The Falcons are on another level they're going to have to show it to me.
Right.
Not again. They won't have to show it to me again like the Chiefs, Ravens, or Cowboys. The Falcons have to show it to me, period. Anything. I have not seen it from the Falcons, nor do I have the faith. So Tampa Bay.
The Falcons did go. You're looking at division last year. 9-8, 9-8, 7-10. The top three teams. Falcons did win 7 games last year, so they were right there with New Orleans and Tampa. I don't know. I'm not a big, fan of the quarterback in Tampa. I don't really think they've got a great offensive scheme. I think they're kind of like Seattle, is that they're as good as their defense is good, and I'm not sure they don't have the same pieces that they've had in the past. I think they've benefited from a very, very weak division. And has the division gotten any better? Well,
no, I don't think so.
New Orleans is, I would say New Orleans is any better. You would think Atlanta would be a little bit better. I think they're going to compete for the division title, but it's going to be a 9-8 winner of that division probably. And then Carolina, who is nowhere near being a playoff team, they ain't going to go 2-15 again. They've brought in a lot of good offensive players. They actually seem to have a concept now on offense that's going to allow them maybe to win 4 or 5 games, and that could end up being deciding who wins that division. Because if they beat you once, then that's a loss that you can't afford, because you're not good enough to, Tampa, for being the first place team in the division, when they go up against the other first place teams in their schedule this year, and they play Detroit and San Francisco and Dallas, they're not going to win those games. They don't play at that level. And in the meantime, the next team is down. Atlanta gets the third place schedule. On the same weekend that Tampa's playing Dallas, Atlanta's playing the Giants. On the same weekend that Tampa's playing the San Francisco, Atlanta's playing Seattle. On the same weekend that Tampa's playing Detroit, Atlanta's playing Minnesota. I mean, it just adds up. I mean, Atlanta could go 3-0 in those games, and Tampa could go 0-3. Tampa is going to go 0-3 in those games. And in a division where it's only going to take 9 games to win, I think that, like I said, you better sweep Carolina, because you're going to need those 2 wins at the end. And I just think Carolina's going to beat somebody, if not 2 people, in that division this year, because they've, I think they've taken a small step, at least anyway, in a positive direction.
Of all the bad teams last year, which one do you see the most chance to have the best improvement this season?
Well, again, this gets back to what I said before. To me, if by bad teams you mean third or fourth place.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Okay.
Third or fourth in the division. Yeah.
To me, the two teams that stand out easily in that group would be the Jets and the Bengals. I mean, the Bengals finished in last
Right.
in their division last year. They could win.
They don't feel like a last place team, though.
Exactly, and that's why I qualify. Well, do you really mean bad teams, or do you mean last place teams? Because the Bengals you wouldn't call a bad team, but you would call them a last place team, and they're much better than a 9-8 team last year. The Jets are way better than a 7-10 team from last year. The obvious choice in the NFC would be the Bears. Clearly the Bears are going to be better. They should be a lot better offensively, but they're now in a surprisingly tough division. If I had to pick one team over there, I don't think any of the teams that finished in third or fourth place last year are serious, teams that could win a playoff game. Sure, Atlanta could win the division, but that's, you'd love to draw them in the first round of the playoffs.
Right.
Giants, Washington, Seattle, Arizona, Minnesota, Chicago, Atlanta, Carolina. If I told you not any of those 8 teams were going to make the playoffs, it wouldn't be wow, that's a bold statement. I just don't, I think Arizona, if I had to pick the 2 teams that I think are going to have more wins, the most wins more this year than last year, I'd go right to the bottom. I'd go right to Arizona and Carolina and say Arizona's got to be better than 4-13 this year, and Carolina's going to be way better than 2-15. They're going to win 5 games, and how many other teams are going to win 3 more games this year than they did last year? Anybody? Sure. The Jets might, but so if that's what we're looking at, who's going to win more games this year than they won last year in the NFC? I'd say I'd put my money on Carolina to be the team that has the greatest win improvement.
This team is a little interesting to me. We could consider them a bad team from last season. Their coach disagreeing with ownership at the end of the day. Talking about Vrabel, so he's gone from Tennessee. They bring in the Bengals offensive coordinator. They have Levis as quarterback. I get it at the end of the day. I'm assuming he's going to be the day one starter for Tennessee. But they bring in Ridley, and was Ridley super great last year? We had him stocked pretty high in our books, but he probably didn't live up to his expectations at the end of the day. They do have some unique wide receiver talent. Hopkins resurrected his career there. They still have the big draft pick from a couple years ago. Obviously, Derrick Henry is gone as well, but their running backs have shown promise in their respective backgrounds as well for what they've done. So Tennessee just kind of an interesting team to me. Jacksonville, I just have some bad mojo about them, and I just can't buy on the Colts yet. And I get it as Texans division to win, I think, at the end of the day. But I could see Tennessee sneaking out a couple more wins than what they had last year.
Yes, I agree with it. Whoa, hey, what happened? I agree with that. I think that you're right, that division, there's no reason to think that, Jacksonville went 9-8 last year. Indy went 9-8. And I think each is going to be hard-pressed to win that many games again this year. I think that's kind of their ceiling. If they went 9-8 again, I wouldn't be surprised, but I certainly would be surprised if they won 10 games. And this is why Houston is such a glamorous pick, to maybe do something in the playoffs, is that they, like Kansas City, you can pencil them in right now as they're going to win their division title. Before I get to Tennessee, I got to go on a tangent here and say, to me, the most overrated player from a fantasy standpoint going into this season, based on how he's being drafted, is Richardson, is the Colts quarterback. I mean,
Number 6 quarterback right now being drafted.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is ridiculous. That's people overthinking the importance of being a running quarterback. Yes, it's important. Yes, if Jalen Hurts is going to score 15 touchdowns again running the ball, then you should draft him. You can't draft him early enough. But Jalen Hurts doesn't run the ball. He's not going to get injured running for his 15 touchdowns, whereas Richardson is going to get injured 5 minutes after he starts running like he did last year. And that's the way he has to play. He's got a great arm. No, he doesn't. He maybe he can throw the ball far, but he is not. He is not. If in terms of strictly passing ability of the 30 NFL starting quarterbacks, he's got to be 31st. I mean, he's not. He's not an NFL passing quarterback. But he is a great runner. And if Indy is committed to running the ball with him like he did in college, I mean, basically turn him into Tim Tebow, understand that that's the way we're going to play, then fine. Then he's got a chance to be successful until he gets injured in the 3rd or 4th game. And then you better have a Marcus Mariota or some other option quarterback, backing him up, because this is what's going to happen with him. I mean, unless your goal in fantasy is strictly to win your opening game, because we're pretty sure that Richardson is going to be healthy for the opener, unless that's your ultimate goal is win on opening week, then there's no way I would draft Richardson onto my fantasy team. I don't care if I had the last pick in the draft and he was still available. Anyway, so back to Tennessee. I do think Tennessee should be a lot better. Well, that's just, not a bold statement either. Should be a lot better offensively than they've been. I think the quarterback has potential, like you said. They've got decent receivers. I also think that while Pollard has gotten the headlines as having signed with them and potentially being their starting running back, I think Spears is a very good man.
He's very good. Yeah.
I think that he has the potential to be a big surprise this year. Now, he's going to have to beat out Pollard, which I don't think is going to be that difficult. I think he's a way better.
At worst, they're going to split the reps. Yeah.
Well, that's the way they're going to start. It's kind of like Miami. When Miami says, well, Achane is going to split the carries with Mostert, they even drafted a guy who's supposed to be real good. It's going to be by committee. Like, have you seen Achane run the ball? Like, he doesn't do committees. He's going to run the ball, as much as he can physically do it. And he's maybe even the most talented running back in the entire NFL. He's not going to be a committee guy. And I'd say the same thing about Spears. Not that he's, a top talent in the NFL, but I'd say a top 15 talent at running back. And here they bring in a guy from the Cowboys, who the Cowboys didn't want anymore, and who got a great opportunity there and, did nothing with it. I don't see that being a real serious competition. I mean, yes, they have to play it off as such in the preseason, but opening day, I'm going to be very disappointed if Spears does 15 carries and that's the way we trend for the rest of the season. Call that a committee if you want. I don't call that a committee. I call that, identifying your best running back and going with him. And if he's as good as I think he can be with their receivers, with their new quarterback, with their new system, I think Tennessee, can be, I hesitate to say, an entertaining team this year because they got a long way to go to even to average in that category. But a team that at least doesn't put you to sleep when you watch them. And in that regard, in my world, fantasy worthy.
All right, let's get to some fantasy stuff. And we'll kind of, again, easy transition. Just like the oils and the turbines of the jet engine, we are running smooth here. And Richardson, we talked about him being quarterback 6 on your average draft position of 52 right now, is Anthony Richardson from the Colts. But I'm going to look at the guy right above him, Dave, and I'm going to potentially reach for him after I get my 2 stud receivers. We talked about receivers getting drafted early nowadays. That's a ploy I've used for many, many years now. But instead of going for my 3rd receiver, I'm going to go ahead and hopefully snag C.J. Stroud. And again, and we talked about it before this show. We talked about it all last year, with teams like Green Bay. There's just so much talent there. The wealth is just going to get spread around so much. So who do you key on? And I think you key on C.J. Stroud just because he's going to be dishing it out to everybody. Let's be honest here. He has tight ends. He goes 4 or 5 receivers deep. They could easily play a 5 wide of talented wide receivers where the 5th receiver would easily be a 3rd receiver on every other NFL team. That's kind of the way I see it. So I'm going to take a reach on C.J. Stroud here. I'm going to try to get him in the 3rd round, hopefully. That will be the deal there. He's average draft position right now is 48th. So if you figure if that's a 12-team league, then he's going to be right there at the beginning of the 4th round, right? Or all the way through the 4th.
End of the 4th.
End of the 4th round, beginning of the 5th.
Right.
So Stroud is someone that I'm going to maybe probably take in the 3rd round just so I have my hands on him. What do you think about that?
Well, 2 thoughts there. Number one is I'm 100% agree with you on Stroud. I think Stroud would not surprise me if Stroud ended up as the most productive fantasy quarterback this year. Like you said, how can he not be? The way he played last year and the weapons they have, it's an overkill. And they even got a better running back this year, so you can't, you're not going to play 6 defensive backs against them, all season long. They got a decent tight end. I mean, you could argue, I rank him 2nd on my list behind Burrow as quarterback, but I'll tell you what, I could easily flip-flop them. And I just think he's that good. That said, last year, my strategy for drafting quarterbacks was be the last guy to take the quarterback. And that's because there's really no elite. Again, I might think Stroud's better than Burrow, Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, Love, Hurts, Richardson. I mean, it's beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Those 8 guys, I don't see a big difference between those 8 guys. So why would you take one of the top 2 guys from that list rather than one of the bottom 2 guys, given that opportunity? And then once you get past, say, 8 or 9 or whatever, like, okay, let's say Burrow's gone, Stroud, Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, Love, Hurts, Richardson, those 8, let's say that, they're gone. Oh boy, what's that leave for me? Well, I mean, I'll tell you what it leaves for me. A very, very good quarterback. I'd love to have Goff as my starting quarterback this year. Purdy,
Yeah.
how can you argue with his number? Murray, has a chance to have a, really nice season this year.
Tua's still down there. Herbert's still down there, for crying out loud, right?
Right. Stafford, again, beauty's in the eyes of the beholder down here. There's so many guys where you would say, if all 9 teams in my league all draft a quarterback, then what happens is, they're not going to draft a backup quarterback. Especially if you get one of these top 7 or 8 guys, you think, well, why am I drafting a backup quarterback? I got Mahomes. I'm going to draft my backup quarterback in the 11th round. And that's kind of, you don't need a backup quarterback if you think your quarterback's really good. And these top 8 guys all sound like they're really good. And that helps the people who don't draft quarterbacks, because now all 9 guys got a quarterback and it's the 5th round. I don't need to take one right now. I can wait. I can draft my backup running back or my tight end, 6th round. Give me another receiver. 7th round. Give me another running back. Come the 8th round, when somebody finally decides, you know what, I'm going to take a backup quarterback, that's your signal to draft your quarterback. Because at that point, like I said, I didn't even mention Caleb Williams, Rodgers, Daniels, Tua, you would think would, put up nice numbers. On top of Goff and Murray and Purdy and Cousins, Stafford. I mean, all it takes is, 1 or 2 of those guys where you would say, man, give me Goff. Goff wasn't even drafted in a lot of leagues last year. Give me Goff in round 8, and I've got a really good team. Because while you were drafting your quarterback in round 3, I was getting me another elite receiver, or I got me a top-notch running back, and so I'm stacked. I'm stacked with, before round 8, I've got 3 wide receivers. I've got 3 running backs. I've got a tight end. All are really good, right? I've got the foundation of a great team. I have no quarterback, but that's okay, because in round 8, I'm going to draft Goff, and you know what? When all's said and done, he's going to be a top 10 quarterback. He's going to be a guy who, I don't need him to win for me. I just don't need, I can't afford him to be terrible. And, Aaron Rodgers, I don't think you need to worry about him, throwing away fantasy games for you. I mean, he's just someone who he's going to put up decent numbers every week. And, you take a shot with Daniels or Williams or some of these guys, Levis, we don't know that much about, in terms of they could be really good, they could be really bad. And all right, that's not a risk I'm willing to take. I don't need to reach for a long shot winner in round 8. I need a game manager. I need Rodgers. I need Goff. I need, somebody like that, even Cousins, who I think is a notch below these guys. So that's my strategy on quarterbacks. Like I said, my strategy is going to be, let the other 9 teams draft a quarterback. Let somebody take a backup so that 10 quarterbacks are taken. Then draft your quarterback. And I'm guessing that that's going to get you into the 7th or 8th round without having drafted a quarterback. I used that strategy last year. I drafted Aaron Rodgers last year. He played 4 downs. He was the only guy on my roster that I drafted.
He was my quarterback too.
Yeah. And yet it didn't matter, because when I went to the waiver wire and Goff was sitting there, it's like, you know what? I can win with this level of quarterback because I've used my first 7 picks on 7 really good players. I've got the best foundation of a team without a quarterback. I don't need my quarterback to be a star. And like I said, tight end, we can discuss the same principle and how tight end has changed this year as compared to what it was last year. But it's if there's no real drop off from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, from 3 to 4, then what's your hurry? You might think Stroud's going to be the best quarterback, and you can get him in round 3, and you could very well be right. But at the end of the day, he's only going to give you a point or two more every week than Mahomes, than Jackson, than Burrow. And so why didn't you just wait and draft Burrow in round 5? If it's only going to cost you a point or two. Meanwhile, sitting up there in round 3, you had a chance to draft. I won't throw a name out there, but just for the sake of discussion, you had a chance to draft Harrison, in round 3 as your second wide receiver or your third wide receiver, and you passed on that so that you could draft this quarterback who's going to give you a point or two edge over a guy you could have gotten 3 rounds later. I don't think that's a wise choice.
You know what you said famously on this show, I think probably 2 years ago you said this, is that you can even take a pig and dress it up with lipstick and take it to the prom once a week here and there, picking up a quarterback off the scrap heap if you really need to at the end of the day as well, once the season gets going.
My prom date had that philosophy. When she convinced her mom, look, Mom, I can dress him up and put a lipstick on him. He'll look fine in the photos. So that got me in the door.
All right, let me ask you about McCaffrey, because he's obviously the number 1 pick overall. That at least on the consensus side here, I think. What do you think the percentage of drafts will be with McCaffrey number 1 overall, Dave? You think that's 75%, 80%?
It should be.
It should be.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are, yes.
So that being said, and you're out there, so you're embedded, so I need to hear it from you too. I'm hearing rumors of if maybe the 49ers are out to pretty decent leads, that they may take some reps off of McCaffrey to try to save him for the long haul for his career. Is there any rhyme or reason to that? You're out there, you're local. If you draft McCaffrey overall, is that something that may scare not only you, but the individual drafting McCaffrey at the end of the day, that maybe if the Niners are up, 21 points or something in the third quarter, they may lean off of him a little bit? Is that worrisome at all? What do you got on that?
Well, two things to say about that. Number one, we heard this exact same thing last year.
Okay.
And at that point, he was at even greater injury risk because he had a history of injuries. He played an entire season last year and didn't get hurt. I think everybody's a risk to get injured, but I wouldn't call him injury prone anymore, but you might have labeled him that last year. So I'm not more worried about him getting hurt than anybody else. And the 49ers last year certainly treated him like that. They overused him last year. I thought they could have backed off of him, played their backups more, saved him for later on in the season. They kind of rolled the dice with it. And you know what? It never backfired on them. They gave him all these touches, and yet he was still perfectly healthy for the playoffs and the Super Bowl. I don't see why that would change at all. They don't have, this isn't Spears and Pollard where we need to get the other guy on the field because he's really good, or we just paid him $10 million. We got to play our backup. No, they don't have that guy. So I would expect the 49ers to take the same approach with him that they had before. And he's, he's, to me, by far the best running back available. And so he's worth that risk. Like I said, you could draft, who would have thought last year when you drafted and you used the second pick on Justin Jefferson, Did anybody say, well, gee, he might get hurt and then I'd be really screwed? No, nobody said that. Did he get hurt? Yes. Were you really screwed? Yes. There was nothing you can do about it. You can't foresee these kinds of things. And I don't think he's any more likely to be, to get injured than anybody else. Second thing I'll say is, if you're worried that the 49ers get so far ahead that they're going to take him out, well, how did they get ahead in the first place?
Right.
It's the, I remember, the Cowboys' heyday when they had Aikman and Irvin and Emmitt Smith, and the Cowboys led every game 21-3 at halftime, and then all they did was hand the ball to Emmitt Smith the entire second half. It's like, oh man, that's killed the value of Irvin and Aikman. They never threw a pass in the entire second half. Yeah, but you know what? He completed 2 touchdown passes to Irvin in the first half of every game. And if that's the way it's going to be with McCaffrey, that's the way the 49ers got ahead 21-3 at halftime, is because he scored 2 touchdowns and already caught 4 balls and already rushed for 70 yards. Then you know what? You're okay, because you've got your 22 fantasy points in the first half of the game. Who cares if he plays? I mean, certainly you like him to play the second half, but it's not like they're taking him out because he's got 0 points. He's not doing anything today. No, he's done so good that, if we put the 49ers in a position to be able to take him out, and that's that's a good position to be in if you got him in your lineup. So I had 0 concern about either any issue with McCaffrey.
All right, let's talk about a couple of the players now that their draft stock is up tremendously from last season because of their performances from last year. A couple of these guys right there in your neck of the woods in the NFC West. But look at Kyren Williams right now, all the way up to the 16th pick overall, which would make him early or mid-round in the second round. And then also Puka. Puka's way up there too. He's higher than him. He's getting drafted at the end of the first round in some drafts, early second round right now for him. So how about those 2 guys with the Rams off the start? I mean, they're stock high on those guys.
Yeah,
maybe too high, maybe.
Yes, I can't imagine either one of those guys going to be on my team. Right. As much as I agree with what you said, that they're both really good players. I think in Puka's case, I think that the fact that Kupp is back this year, the Kupp should be back at 100%. We're talking about one of the top receivers in the league, when he was healthy. And
he's a steal right now. He's like in the 30s, right?
Exactly.
43rd overall.
I think that he could have a really good season again. Now, the fact that Puka's there sharing kind of similar pass patterns with him, I don't think we're going to see either one of them, if they're both on their game, catching 10 balls. Is going to be one guy's going to catch 8, one guy's going to catch 7, and they're not long distance catches. So it's going to be which of the 2 is going to get in the end zone. And I think both of them, can get in the end zone, but I think it's going to be a 49ers type situation where, one guy's got 8 catches for 50 yards and one guy's got 7 catches for 50 yards. Maybe they each score a touchdown. When all is said and done, oh man, those are good numbers for a 4th round pick. Those are not good numbers for a 2nd round pick. And so I think that he's going too early, based on the Kupp principle. I think Williams, I wouldn't draft Williams for a different reason, and that is, to me, the reason I won my fantasy league last year was because, first off, I lucked into McCaffrey in the first round. I had the 5th pick. He slipped to me. I wasn't planning on drafting him. I got him, and let's not underestimate, the impact that had on me winning, no doubt. But I didn't take another running back until the 6th round, and that's suicide, or has been in the past. But that's no longer the case. Last year, from the 6th round or later, and this is against really, really smart, fantasy players. And this was right off of any draft list you would have projected that these guys would be going in the 6th round or later. But I drafted White from Tampa Bay, Swift, Mostert, Jonathan Taylor. Remember him holding out last year or whatever. Think of that. Think of those 4 guys on top of having, McCaffrey. Rashad White from Tampa Bay, who led the league in catches for a running back. Jonathan Williams, who rushed for 180 yards. Fantasy Super Bowl. Mostert and Swift, who were like the number 2 and 3 at the halfway point of the season, they ranked like 2nd and 3rd in running back points. I mean, I had 4 of those guys. I got them all in the 6th, 7th, 9th, and 10th round. And if you look at this year's draft, those guys are out there again. And if you look, you look below, say, 15 on any draft list, there's a bunch of guys. Zach Moss.
I got one for you.
Good.
J.K. Dobbins.
Okay.
Harbaugh likes to run the ball, right?
Yes, but, is Zamir White, or you're talking Dobbins of, which team you're talking about? The Chargers?
Yeah, the Chargers.
The Chargers, yes. I'm not convinced that they're not going to go with the, Vidal. That's the guy they drafted, Vidal.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm not. Dobbins is not. Yes.
Vidal's below him.
Right. So when I'm talking about the guys who I think are going to be available, in the 5th round or later, you're talking about, Moss, Cook of the Bills,
Najee Harris,
Chubb, Connor, Aaron Jones, maybe even Kamara, White again this year, Swift again this year, Zamir White.
Yep.
It's again, do you have to like all of those guys? No, you don't have to like any of those guys. But it's not like, oh man, there's one guy left in the draft, and I'm praying he gets to me in round 6. I think Zach Moss is a very, very big time sleeper. I was very impressed with how he did for the Colts last year while Taylor wasn't there. Now he goes to Cincinnati, who doesn't have, who steps right in for like the guy who
they like to use Mixon a lot last year too.
Exactly.
On the short passes,
and yet
screens.
He's way down on draft. But I mean, my point is, if he were the only guy out there among these quote unquote sleepers that I was waiting for, and I had to sweat it out. Oh, please get to me in round 6. Please get to me. And then he's gone. Now I'm screwed. Well, then it's a bad draft strategy. But if I wait for him in round 6 and he's gone, you know what? I'll just draft Cook. I'll just draft Jones. I'll draft White. I'll draft Swift. And getting one. Where this helps you is because I didn't draft a quarterback, right? I've got 3 really good wide receivers. I've got me a really good tight end. We're to round 5, and I don't need to draft wide receivers anymore. I don't need to draft tight ends anymore. I'm not drafting a quarterback till round 9. So round 5, 6, 7, 8, I can draft 3 running backs and maybe 1 more wide receiver and attempting, get where there's no quality, draft quantity, and hope that, I'm right about, I don't need to be right about all these guys. I just need to be right about one of them. Give me 1 star. Give me Zach Moss having a great season. And then I'll, my backup, running back, will be Rashad White or Aaron Jones or whoever it is that I can get at this point. And and hope that, I'm right like I was last year. And last year I had too many. If you remember my season last year, I ended up trading Swift and Mostert, who were ranked both in the top 5 in running backs at that point. At the middle of the season, I traded them and threw in Thielen, who was having a nice year, and I got Justin Jefferson, who was injured at the time. But it was like, why am I trading these 2 elite running backs to get a guy who ain't playing for 6 weeks? Well, it's because I had McCaffrey. I had other guys. I had Jonathan Taylor, among the scrappy, guys that I drafted. I had, Rashad White, on my team. So I could afford to trade him and wait for Jefferson. And then Jefferson came along and played well in the fantasy playoffs, especially at the very end, and helped me win a championship. So anyway, the point is that if you, sometimes when you wait when you wait a long time to draft someone, you're not going to get anybody really good, and that means you waited too long. I think wide receivers, are kind of like that. This is why I'd rather go out there. Don't take any chances at wide receiver. If you will go 1, 2, 3 drafting wide receivers, that's fine. There are far worse strategies than that. And like I said, drafting a quarterback early, drafting a running back early that's not McCaffrey, all right. I understand. Yeah, I understand that this is they're going to have good seasons, but you got to look at, what's that mean? What's that going to leave me with in round 6 and 7? I'm going to be out there. I'm going to still need a wide receiver. I'm going to still need a flex. And now all the good wide receivers are gone. Oh, man. I don't like my team all of a sudden. This way, again, and this is beauty's in the eye of the beholder. You've got to look at the draft list and look at, and ask yourself, all right, let's draw a line here at 15. Heck, draw the line at 20. I don't care where you draw the line, and say, are there guys below the line who I'd be comfortable starting? And if there aren't, you better get guys from above the line. But if there are, then okay, this is great. I don't need to draft guys at that position because I like these guys. And this is a strategy that I use at quarterback, obviously. It's a strategy that I use at running back. Would I love to get McCaffrey in round 1? I absolutely would. Will I consider a running back in round 2 or 3 if, Bijan Robinson slips, or Hall or Taylor, that kind of talent slips? Sure. Sure I will. But, I don't think that's going to happen. But, if so, I'm not married to having to take, 3 wide receivers right off the bat.
There's depth. There's depth. And you talked about the tight ends earlier. That's another example right here. This has to be the strongest tight end group that I've ever seen for fantasy perspective wise. When you kind of talk in your terms and you're kind of looking at the middle of the pack down there, or the lower end, you're starting at pick 118 overall with Dalton Schultz. Then you got Hawkinson behind him, Freiermuth, Cole Kmet still available, going average of pick 125. You got to figure Musgrave, who showed great flashes once Green Bay got it going at the end of last season and in the playoffs. If he stays healthy, he's going to probably be some sort of a factor, tight end wise, for Green Bay. Again, go ahead and talk about your tight ends.
I agree with exactly what you said. And again, my strategy on tight ends has changed from last year to this year. Last year, I thought Kelsey was far and away the best tight end. I would have drafted him. I picked 5th. When I picked 5th, I thought, you know what? I'm going to take Kelsey at 5 because McCaffrey's going to be gone, and then the top 3 wide receivers whoever they were at that point, Jefferson, Lamb, and Hill, will probably all be gone. If those four guys are gone, then I'm going to take Kelsey. And that was what I fully prepared to do in the first round. And then, bang, McCaffrey slips to me, and I end up drafting him. But anyway, that was my thinking last year. That Kelsey was so much better than everybody else. Turned out he wasn't that much better than anybody else. And now coming into this year, you could argue he's not even better than Laporta anymore. And now you look at
Laporta's going higher than Kelsey right now in the average.
Right. And you look at, to me, by the end of the year last year, Ferguson, was the best tight end. And so he's going to be taken early. Kittle, McBride had a great season last year. He's everybody's surprise. I really want McBride. Okay, fine. He's going to be taken relatively early. Andrews, Hawkinson, maybe even Kincaid. I think Kincaid's going to have a real nice season. Again, similar to quarterbacks, those are 7 or 8 guys right there where you think, okay, I don't care what order they go in. These are probably going to be the first 8 guys taken. Now, you see anybody below this line who you can get in the, round 5, round 6, whatever that you'd like. You know what? I'll tell you who I would take at that point. I would take Bowers. I think Bowers has a chance to be a real elite, maybe even the best tight end in football, moving forward. Not in the first year necessarily, but I think he's the best tight end maybe ever in college football. And he got injured last year. It's why, he's considered a Heisman Trophy candidate at the beginning of the year, a tight end. By the end of the year, he'd come back. He, wasn't healthy, but he was still productive. He's a unique, Kelsey type of tight end that you're going to throw the ball to 10 times every game. Now, some teams use a tight end, some teams don't. And so you got to ask, well, what type of team is the Raiders? The Raiders are now coached by an offensive line coach. He wants to play conservative. For crying out loud, they drafted Meyer, a Notre Dame star tight end in the 2nd round last year. The last thing they're going to do in this year's draft is use a number 9 pick in the draft, whatever it was, on another tight end. Nobody's that stupid. Wait a minute. If your goal is to run the ball, and you've got, these 2 tight ends who are both 2nd round or higher NFL draft material, then why not? Because they give you the option of not only running the ball effectively, but also being your short, let's play fake, let's throw the ball short to the tight end, because we don't have a quarterback. We don't have Josh Allen who's going to step back, or Herbert, or, one of these, cannon arm guys, Stroud, who's going to step back and, throw the ball 50 yards down the field. We've got arguably the worst quarterback in the league, whether it's McConnell or whether it's Minshew, we want to throw the ball short. We want a ball control, and find the tight end in the short zone. I think that, this is why I think that Bowers lands the perfect spot. I mean, I don't think any other team this year would throw the ball as much to him as he will. I think he's a unique talent at the position. I think right from the get-go, he's got a chance to be a top 5 tight end, and you're getting him. Where's he on your, on the list you were looking at?
Bowers is the 11th tight end coming off the board right now, and that is an average draft position of 90.
Okay, there you go. So, 10-team
so you
league,
can get him, 10-team league. Yeah, he's at the end of the 9th round. Yeah.
Right, I'm saying that, okay, I ain't waiting until the 9th round to draft him. I'll take him in the, in the 5th round, the 6th round. But again, that's while others oh, I got to have Kelsey. I got to have Laporta in round 3. I'm not saying those are bad picks. I'm just saying, you know what? When you're taking Kelsey, I'm taking, Harrison, or I'm taking, a second or a third, elite player at what has become the most important position, most productive position, which is tight end. Which is wide receiver. And now, I've got 3 elite tight ends. There I go again. 3 elite wideouts anchoring my team. And I still got what I consider to be, a top 5 tight end, except that I drafted him 5 rounds later than you drafted yours. And that's what allowed me to have the better foundation on my team than you do. And I think that's how you win fantasy titles. It's not necessarily drafting the best available talent, but rather having a strategy. You look at the draft. Look at, I can get Bowers in round 7. Okay, you know what? I'm not drafting a tight end. I can get Moss or Jones or White or mix or wherever it is. That are projected 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th round running back. I can get 2 or 3 of these guys in the 5th round or later. I can get Goff or Rodgers in the 6th, 7th, or 8th round. And so, what am I doing in the first 4 rounds? Well, you know what? I'm getting wide receivers. I'm going, bang, 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 wide receivers. And I'm getting, last year, I ended up with, of course, I traded for Jefferson, right? I had, Brown from the Eagles, Jefferson, and the guy from the Chargers who with the Bears down.
Oh, Keenan Allen.
Yeah, again, Keenan Allen. It's like, seriously, on one team, you had Jefferson, Brown, and Allen? Yes. And, how'd you do that? Well, like I said, one thing, one way was I made a trade. But it's like, yes, but that's the kind of power you can have as the foundation of your team if you commit to the strategy of, I'm waiting on running backs because I like what's out there late. I'm waiting on quarterbacks because I like what's out there late. I'm waiting on tight ends because I like what's out there late. So I can just blindly take wide receiver, and like, well, how did you get those 3 guys on your team? Well, because I was the only one who went wide receiver to start, and that to me, because of the importance of the position, because of how many good. You can get 3 of the top 15 receivers in a 10-team league by using that strategy, and that's going to give you a leg up on every single team you play during the year.
One little tight end note I'll keep in my back pocket. Keep in mind, even as a second tight end, when Justin Fields really had success last year, he was using Kmet a lot, and he really made Cole Kmet a really, really nice player for the Bears. So I could see some Freiermuth upside if Fields ever really kind of ends up there under center, which, who knows? That could actually be week 1 for all we know. As Camp's playing out now, Fields doing pretty decently against Russell Wilson. You got to figure Wilson's going to be the starter, but you just never know. They may give it to Fields at any time. And that'll be something that he likes his tight ends. So keep that in mind.
I agree with you there. And there are other guys, Njoku, from the Browns,
right.
Who's, a lot of people really like. We've hardly mentioned Goddard. You might have mentioned him, but these are guys who are, they were 5th or 6th guys on the draft list last year, and all of a sudden this year they're 8th, 9th, 10th guys. I didn't even mention. I hate to mention him because he's on my do not draft list, but.
We'll get more into that next week. Yeah, let's talk about that.
I'm not going to be surprised if this guy has a good season because things have changed, and now he's in his 3rd year, and maybe he's learned how to play the game better. Certainly has the talent to be really good, but Pitts of the Falcons, right. Is someone who came into the league as this, kind of what Bowers is coming into the league now as. This hybrid, whether you even call him a tight end, he doesn't even stand on the end of the line. He kind of, he's a wide receiver. He's gonna be the next great thing, and he's been awful. But they have a real quarterback now. They have a different offensive approach. They've got some wideouts, who command attention. They have an elite running game. Maybe Atlanta's going to be a lot better offensively. And this is his 3rd year. Maybe he's learned how to run better patterns or to, break away from press coverage, whatever it is. He certainly has the talent to be a really good player. But again, somebody's going to see him in the preseason, catch a pass, break a tackle, run 50 yards, and say, "Oh man, I'm drafting him." And bang, there he goes in the 4th round. And he could very well have a really good season. I'm not going to be that guy, but just another guy on the tight end list that somebody's going to like, and that's good. It's kind of like Richardson at quarterback. I don't like him, but somebody else is going to like him, and that's good for me because that's just one more quarterback scratched off the list in round 4, round 5 that I wasn't going to draft anyway, and that just means the chance of Rodgers or Goff or whoever slipping to me just increased a little because somebody drafted Richardson.
We're gonna have to start next week's segment off with the do not draft list. We'll have to go right off the bat, get dismayed, disgruntled, and then put in the self-doubt of the talent. All right.
Well,
Dave.
That's the thing, yeah. And you know what? And we'll save this for next week, but. Something that I would caution people on, and that is don't hold a grudge. Right. You weren't necessarily wrong when you drafted this guy last year in the 1st round or in the 2nd round. He got hurt or you underestimated. Well, right, but that, even Justin Jefferson. I'll never draft him again. I used the 2nd pick of the draft last year on him. And he was terrible, and I didn't even make the playoffs. You can't waste your 1st round pick like that. All right, you know what? The guy got hurt, or maybe he was a guy you underestimated the situation that he was in, and he just never had a chance because this was just a terrible offensive team. But you know what? They've become the Falcons, or they've become the Titans, or they become, a team that actually. Has the Panthers. A team that actually has a pulse offensively this year. So that same guy, if he's healthy, which you would expect him to be, he's in a better situation this year. All right, you know what? I'll give him a second chance. I don't like him. I don't like Pitts. I go in thinking I'll never draft Pitts, but you know what? If Bowers is gone, it's the 8th round, and I look around and I say, "Oh boy, all right, I'll bite. I'll take Pitts. His value is too good at this point. You know what? You've got to be open to something like that. And the same thing goes even more so. Well, I'm a Raider fan, so I'll never draft the Broncos. No. If that's your, strategy going into the draft, I want to be in your league because that's not the way you win. You draft the best players, not your favorite players.
All right. Yeah, so we'll get into fantasy etiquette next week as well. We'll go ahead and throw that onto the list. Dave. All right, Dave. Good stuff. We appreciate it. We'll get back next week with him as well as we'll come to you every preseason Sunday here up until September the 8th will come on at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So thank you for tuning in today. You have this program to go back to all week long for replay. So some good content to get you all juiced up here for week 1, September the 5th, officially underway that Thursday night with the Chiefs and the Ravens. All right, Nephew Dave, we thank you a lot for tuning in with us earlier. And Dave Dolgrande from the West Coast in San Francisco. All right, guys, have a good week. Be safe out there and have a great rest of your Sunday.